Did you ever make decisions or give your opinion on topics you actually have no idea about? And if yes, do you regret it? The mental model of the Circle of Competence can help us to avoid making decisions or giving our opinions on topics we actually have no idea about. The concept was popularized by legendary investors Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger. They use this concept in the domain of investing to only invest in companies one knows and one understands. The core idea of the Circle of Competence is to only stay inside it, to only stay in our main competencies, and to distinguish between what we know and what we don't know. Making decisions outside of our core competencies, outside of our Circle of Competence, can prove fatal. There are different ways to illustrate this mental model. Illustrations are simplification and are here only for delivering the core message. The inner circle. Things we know and are aware that we know. Basically, our Circle of Competence, where we can more or less confidently make decisions or argue about those topics inside. The middle circle. Things we think we know but don't actually know. Areas where we might overestimate our competence. Here we tend to have an opinion and make decisions when we are not aware that we don't really have competence. The outer circle. Things we don't know and we are aware that we don't know. Areas where we recognize our lack of competence. What we can see here is that the circle in the middle is the danger zone, where we think we know something, but actually we don't know. People chronically misappraise the limits of their own knowledge. That's one of the most basic parts of human nature. Knowing the edge of your Circle of Competence is one of the most difficult things for a human being to do. Knowing what you don't know is much more useful in life and business than being brilliant. By Charlie Munger. The idea of the Circle of Competence is to emphasize the importance of our self-awareness, to stay in our area of expertise, to stay in our area of competencies. And what I found most important is to emphasize the importance of the limits of our own knowledge. So let's take now a practical example. We apply this mental model now to the domain of teaching/content creation. Namely, we apply this now to the channel Invisible Compass, or specifically this video here. One rule I have for this channel is to only teach or show what I really understand and know by myself. And in other words, this basically means that I only teach or show what I think at least lies in my Circle of Competence, and not what lies outside. The inner circle, basically the Circle of Competence, would include the topic of mental models. Why? Because I read excessively about them and use many mental models on a frequent basis. I build some competencies on that topic. Moving to the next circle, the outer circle. The area of things I really don't know and I'm aware that I don't know them are topics like astrophysics and archaeology. They are totally out of my knowledge base, and if I talk about them here, I think you would notice that I have zero understanding in those areas. Moving now to the middle circle, what we called before the dangerous area, of things we think we understand or know, but in reality we don't have any understanding or knowledge in it. Could be in my example new mental models, which I read quickly about, but don't really understand at their core. There's a mental model from physics called breakpoints. While I think I know parts of it, I have to dig in much deeper to understand it better. In addition, I have to use it and to make my own experience with it. This lies at the moment not in my Circle of Competence, but I could easily mistake it, that it is inside. And exactly for those things, for this middle circle to be aware of those things, the concept of Circle of Competence can incredibly help us. It is important to remember the following words by Warren Buffett. Everybody's got a different Circle of Competence. The important thing is not how big the circle is. The important thing is staying inside the circle. By Warren Buffett. It feels like that people often expect us to have an opinion on everything, and that everything often includes topics which laying outside of our Circle of Competence. The most important thing to stay inside of our Circle of Competence is to be extremely honest with ourselves. And on exactly this, here is a quote by the famous physicist Richard Feynman. The first principle is that you must not fool yourself, and you are the easiest person to fool. By Richard Feynman. In the domain of knowledge, we are our own worst enemy. We tend to often get too overconfident, for example. It is really helpful in life to be realistic with oneself, to be realistic with our qualities. For example, when we are 80 years old and we want to become a successful athlete, It is pretty hard and really unrealistic. And to this point, some more thoughts by Charlie Munger. You have to figure out what your own aptitudes are. If you play games where other people have the aptitudes and you don't, you are going to lose. And that's as close to certain as any prediction that you can make. You have to figure out where you have got an edge, and you've got to play within your own circle of competence. And people who could never win a chess tournament or stand in center court in a respectable tennis tournament can rise quite high in life by slowly developing a circle of competence, which results partly from what they were born with and partly from what they slowly develop through work. By Charlie Munger. What are we naturally good in? Through nature and nurture. On top, we can expand our circle of competence. This leads us to the next chapter. And how to expand your circle of competence? Exactly to this question, I found interesting approaches by another investor named Mohnish Pabrai. One approach is to not bother with expanding the circle. I think that if you were going to branch out, if you will, the best way to do it is to start really small. So make a small bet and obviously talk to people and experts and so on. By Mohnish Pabrai. The first approach is extremely interesting. How I would interpret it is it's not always in the first place so necessary to expand our circle of competence. Because what means expanding is that we increase the quantity of our competencies. Another way would be we could focus on our existing competencies and trying to improve the quality from them. The second approach of how to expand our circle of competence has basically two parts, the theory part and the practical part. The theory part involves talking to people, talking to experts, and read about that subject. The practical part is what I found really interesting, as Mohnish says, to place a small bet, for example, in the domain of investing. And what does it bring us is that we get practical experience, that we get a feel for the subject matter. For example, when we want to be a programmer, for example, we can read all the books about programming. We can read all the textbooks about this one programming language. But as long as we don't get our hands dirty, so to speak, we don't develop a feel for this programming. Another example could be if we want to be a biologist and we could read all the biology textbooks on this subjects which interest us. But I think an important part of a biologist is also the laboratory work. And I would say that most of us don't have an access to a professional laboratory. But we could, for example, build our own microscope, or we could buy like a cheap one and then experiment with it by ourselves. Because we can't get a feel for experimentation, for looking through a microscope just by watching videos how someone watches through a microscope, or to read in textbooks how someone watches through it, or see some pictures from a microscope. I think it's really important to get the practical experience in this field. Actually, Mohnish thinks that, and I just agree with them. By being aware of our own knowledge, of what we know and what we don't know, and trying to focus to stay in the area of what we know, basically staying in the area of our circle of competence, can avoid many mistakes in the first place. It helps tremendously when we are honest with ourselves, because as Richard Feynman says, we are the easiest to fool ourselves. We don't have to compare our circle of competence to another person's circle of competence, because the size of the circle doesn't matter. But what matters is that we stay inside and that we only make decisions or giving our opinions on topics which we actually have competencies about. As always, I wish you a fantastic day.